Okay. Good morning. This is the last chapter in our book, Charlie Bones and the Invisible Boy. It is very long, so I'll only be doing half a chapter today. All right, this is called A Belt of Black Jewels. The girl called Belle Donner had vanished from Bloor's Academy. For most children, this was a great relief. But Charlie knew he hadn't seen the last of Yolanda Ewbeam. He discovered from Cook that Ollie's meeting with the Blue Boa had been entirely successful. This was great news, but Ollie had been asking for his brother, and no one knew what had happened to Samuel Sparks. Charlie discussed his problem with Fidelio, who was feeling rather left out of things since the night of Wind and Spirits. "We can't do much about it till weekend," said Fidelio, "and then Dad has booked me to play the violin at my cousin's wedding. But I'll give it up to help you, Charlie. The others seem a bit preoccupied." This was true. When Tancred and Lysander heard the good news about Ollie, they felt they had accomplished all that was required of them. Gabriel had a lot of piano practice to catch up with, and Billy couldn't really be expected to help. He wandered around, dazed from his encounter with the boa and longing to be reunited with Rembrandt. But it was Emma who had come off worse. Dorcas had bound her hands with unusually powerful cord, and ever since that night, the fingers that had briefly turned to feathers ached continuously. The pain was so bad, Emma could barely hold her pen, but she had promised to make a very special belt for Olivia, and nothing would persuade her to abandon the task. Mrs. Marlowe, the drama teacher, had been so impressed by Olivia's acting in rehearsals that she had decided to give her the role of leading princess. And Emma, excited by Olivia's good news, promised to make her friend the most beautiful costume ever. The long dress was finished and hung on a rail at the back of the dressmaking class. It was made of red silk with panels of shiny black. The sleeves were long and tight with cuffs of sparkling black net, and the hem was encrusted with tiny black sequins. Everyone admired the dress, and Olivia made frequent visits to Emma's class just to stand and gaze at her beautiful costume. All it needed was a belt. Emma was working on this now, but she was afraid that the belt would never be completed. Today, she had stitched only 2 black beads in place, and already every joint in her fingers was aching. "Shall I do a bit for you?" asked Dorcas, who was sitting opposite Emma at one of the large work tables. "No, thanks, I'll manage," said Emma. She put another shining circle of jet in place. A small wire hook was fixed to every piece, and the hook was sewn onto the belt so that each bead moved independently, flashing and sparkling as it caught the light. The effect was stunning. A belt of black jewels. Emma put up her hand. "Please, can I get a glass of water?" she asked Miss Singerly, the dressmaking teacher. "Of course. Are you all right, Emma?" Miss Singerly was concerned. Emma looked even paler than usual, and her work was progressing so slowly. "I'm okay, just thirsty," said Emma. She left the classroom and began the long walk to the classrooms. When she'd had her drink, she leaned against the basins and massaged her aching fingers. Would she ever fly again? She wondered. Emma wasn't sure how long she was away from the class, but when she got back, she found that someone had sewn a whole row of beads onto the belt. "Thought you needed some help," said Dorcas. "Thanks." Emma didn't know whether to be grateful or suspicious. Dorcas had been unusually friendly since Belle's departure. The bell rang, and Emma carefully folded the belt and put it in her bag. She would have to work on it over the weekend, so she rolled a handful of beads in her handkerchief and dropped them into her bag with the belt. It was Friday, and Emma was looking forward to a nice long sleep in her own comfortable room above the bookshop. Charlie couldn't wait to see Ollie. In fact, everyone who had been involved in his rescue wanted to meet him. Even Tancred and Lysander were willing to risk bats and spiders, should they appear, in order to get a glimpse of an invisible boy made visible. "The old bat's probably flown off to Transylvania anyway," said Gabriel as they ran out to the school buses. "Don't bet on it," muttered Charlie. There was a surprise waiting for Charlie at home. Maisie was back. She was having tea with Uncle Peyton when Charlie walked in. After a lot of hugging and tears on Maisie's part, Charlie's favorite grandmother made him sit down and eat a plate of fish and chips while she told him something very interesting. Listen to this, Charlie, said his uncle solemnly. It might explain a few things. Okay, fire away, Maisie said. Maisie pulled her chair closer to his. Well, Charlie, as you know, I've been with my sister, Doris. Is she better? Asked Charlie. Much better, thank you, Charlie. She's quite a bit older than me and knows more about the family. I'm not sure why she waited until she was at death's door to tell me this, but at that point, Charlie's mother walked in and another long hugging session took place. Patience, Charlie, said Uncle Peyton. It's worth the wait. It wasn't until Amy Bone had her own plate of fish and chips that Maisie saw fit to continue with her story. Where was I? She asked. Your sister was at death's door, said Charlie. So she was. Well, all of a sudden, she says, Maisie, she says, if I die, rescue my papers from the desk. Don't let them burn them. Of course I won't, I said, patting her poor white hand. And then she insists I get the papers and start sorting them right there and then. What a mess. She'd been hoarding useless stuff for years. I'd got most of it spread out on the floor by her bed when I picked up an old paper bag, and out came this old roll of paper. Maisie stopped and gazed at Charlie. It was a family tree, Charlie. And guess what it says? Haven't a clue, said Charlie. Well, at the top of the tree, there's this person with a strange, unpronounceable name. When I asked my sister about it, she said, oh, him. He was a wizard. By all accounts, a Welsh wizard. That's why he's got an unusual name. A wizard? Said Charlie, sitting up. Are you sure? Positive, said Maisie, beaming. So the Joneses aren't non-entities after all. We're as special as the U-beams. So there. Mrs. Bone thoughtfully stirred her tea. But that means Charlie has got it on both sides, she said. Power or magic or whatever it is. Exactly, said Uncle Peyton, excitedly banging the table. You see, Charlie, the wand does belong to you. That's why it works for you and no one else. That wily old sorcerer must have stolen it from your ancestor. I've had a look at the dates. Scarpa was a lot younger. He could have been the wizard's apprentice. Maybe he stole it when the old man died. Maybe that's why Scarpo didn't try to trick me this time, because of the wand and my connection to the wizard. He could have been a little anxious about what you would do with that wand, said Peyton. Charlie scratched his thatch of hair. Wow, he murmured. Wow, I've got a double dose. He wasn't quite sure how he felt about it, but he was certainly flabbergasted. Do you think Grandma Bone knows about this? She might have guessed, said Uncle Peyton. Eustatia's clairvoyant, don't forget. Perhaps she had an inkling. Charlie stared at his fish and chips. Do you mind if we don't talk about this for a while? He murmured. I want to think about it. Of course you do, love, said Maisie. It's probably a bit of a shock, isn't it? But I'll give you the family tree to look at. After all, you are the last of our branch of Joneses. Charlie took the wrinkled roll of parchment up to bed with him, and for a long time he stared at the strange names, the dates, the births, and marriages, wondering if any of those other ancestors had the power. Had they used the wand? And if so, what for? It had been a busy week, to say the least. And now this. Charlie lay back and closed his eyes. Right now, it was all too much to take in. On Saturday morning, Julia Ingledew was about to open the bookshop when her eye fell on a beautiful jeweled belt. It was lying on her desk where Emma had left it the night before. Julia Ingledew was not a vain woman, but she had an exceptionally small waist, and who could blame her for being proud of it? She picked up the belt, and the black jewels glittered in every light. It had been made for a child, but how would it look on her? Surely it would fit to perfection. Julia wrapped the belt around her waist. It was tight, but she drew in her breath. Yes, it fit. She closed the clasp and went to the mirror. The belt looked wonderful against the emerald green of her dress, and Julia gave a little twirl, and the dazzling jewels jingled mysteriously. Ooh, she sighed. She had never felt more beautiful. She took another deep breath. for the belt was very light, but she couldn't seem to get enough air into her lungs. She coughed rather violently. Her head felt as though it were being squeezed in a vice. The feeling traveled down her spine, and Julia staggered from the pain. She attempted to loosen the belt, but the clasp wouldn't open. Julia's heart began to beat wildly. Emma, she moaned. Emma, help me. Charlie was having breakfast when the doorbell rang on and on and on. Someone had their fist on the bell, or it was stuck. Hold on, called Charlie, still chewing toast. I'm coming. Help, help, cried a voice. Charlie opened the front door, and Emma almost fell on into the hall. Oh, Charlie, she cried. Something awful's happened to my auntie. What sort of awful? Said Charlie, wiping his mouth. The landing above him was all at once crowded with grandmothers, both shouting, Has something happened? Who is it? What's the fuss? Do you want a glass of water? Charlie asked Emma. The urgency of the situation hadn't quite sunk in. No, moaned Emma. I want someone to come. Now I want someone to help. I run to the doctor's office, but I didn't know what to say, and I don't think they took me seriously. What's going on? Said Uncle Peyton's voice. Oh, Mr. Ubeam, it's my auntie, cried Emma. I think she's dying. What? In 4 bounds, Uncle Peyton had cleared the staircase. Let's go, he said. Oh, thank you, Emma. Emma shot out of the door. By the time they reached the pavement, Uncle Peyton was already several strides ahead. Charlie stood and shook his head. Things were moving too fast for him, but he was not too dazed to notice the nasty smile on Grandma Bones' face just before she went back into her room. I'm going to the bookshop, Charlie said to Maisie. Good boy, said Maisie. Charlie leapt upstairs and got the wand from the under his bed. He wasn't sure why it suddenly seemed so important, but since he'd learned its history, he felt perhaps it had a part to play in a desperate situation. By the time he was on the front step, Emma and his uncle had disappeared. Charlie raced up Filbert Street along the main road until he collided with 3 dachshunds whose master angrily told him to watch that stick. The bookshop door was still open, banging ominously in the breeze, and Charlie lashed it carefully behind him and made sure the closed sign was showing. He found Uncle Peyton in Miss Ingledew's back room, giving her the kiss of life. Embarrassed to see his uncle doing what he was doing, Charlie looked at the ceiling. Please don't let her die, cried Emma. Oh, please. Charlie moved closer. Miss Ingledew was lying on her sofa. Her face was a pale blue, her eyes open and staring, her mouth gaping like a fish. Uncle Peyton's kiss of life clearly hadn't worked, and now he resorted to pressing his hands hard on Miss Ingledew's chest. Loosen the belt, Emma, he said. I can't, wailed Emma. I've tried. What? Peyton pulled at the clasp, and a blue spark shot across his fingers. Ouch! What the heck? He pulled again with the same result. He seized the belt with both hands and tried to tear it apart. It's impossible, he muttered. What's this thing made of? We need a knife or wire cutter, something that can cut through steel. It won't be any use, said Emma in a small, scared voice. I think it's been bewitched. I left it, you see, to get some water. It's all my fault. Peyton stared at her aghast. This is how they punish people, he said in a low voice. If Julia, he choked on the next words, and then, falling on his knees, he took Miss Ingledew's pale hand and pressed it to his lips. Oh, my dear, he sighed, I am so sorry. Charlie looked on in horror. He was shocked to see his uncle in such a state. He was going to give up just like that. Was Miss Ingledew already dead? He couldn't believe it. He felt something move in his right hand, and his fingers tingled with warmth. And that's where we're going to end it today.